Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, a little bit of a different approach.
We're still exploring these big themes, love and loss and time.
Stuff that kind of hits everyone, right?
Exactly. But we're looking at them through a Japanese animated film.
Called 5 centimeters per second.
And get this, it's dubbed in Hindi.
So even if you don't understand Hindi, the film's trying to make you feel something.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to unpack. How this film, even translated, speaks to something universal.
Right, to something we all get as humans.
So the film starts by introducing us to Takaki and Akari. They're elementary school kids who form this really strong bond.
And their connection is even stronger because they both move around a lot.
Because of their parents' jobs.
Imagine always being the new kid in school.
It'd be tough.
So in a world that's always changing, their friendship is like this anchor. This steady and precious thing.
It's like their own little safe haven, right? And there's this really beautiful scene where Akari talks about how cherry blossoms fall at 5 centimeters per second.
You got it.
Now, on the surface, it's a beautiful image.
Sure.
But the film uses it for something much deeper.
Oh, yeah. It's a metaphor. Think about what that image brings to mind. Cherry blossoms beautiful, but they don't last long. They drift down so slowly. And that's just like Takaki and Akari's time together. Beautiful, but temporary.
So it sets up this tension, right? How do you hold on to something precious when life keeps pulling you apart?
Yeah, it makes you think, is it even possible? Or are we just going to watch these moments disappear?
And that question becomes even more important when Akari's family moves away to Tochigi, far from Takaki.
And they try to stay in touch through letters.
Which end up being really important for them.
Way more than just words on paper. They're like a lifeline to each other.
When you read the Hindi transcript, you can really feel how much they miss each other.
For sure.
There's this one detail that stuck with me. Takaki Peke's, the seasons changing in Tokyo, while reading Akari's letters about the snow in Tochigi. Even though they're apart, they're still connected by these shared experiences of nature and time passing.
Right. But, of course, letters can only do so much. So, they plan this reunion when Takaki takes a train to see Akari.
But there's a twist.
The train is delayed over and over again because of heavy snow.
It's almost ironic. The snow connects them in their letters.
Yeah.
But in reality, it keeps them apart.
And the film uses that so well. It builds this tension, And it's a visual way to show the challenges they're facing.
And then when they finally meet after all that waiting...
It's emotional. It's like a roller coaster.
There's joy, of course, but also this awkwardness.
Like it's grown apart a little.
And this underlying sadness that they'll have to say goodbye again.
And here's where the film really digs into missed opportunities. Remember Takaki wrote a letter for Akari, pouring his heart out?
Yeah.
But in all the chaos at the train station, he loses the letter.
Oh, wow. I didn't catch that. What do you think that lost letter means?
It's symbolic, I think. It's like their communication breaks down, a missed chance to say how they truly feel. And that leads to them drifting apart.
So after the reunion, their lives go in different directions.
Takaki's always adapting to new places and people. And Akari seems to be moving on, but there's this feeling of loss that hangs over them both.
Like a what-if kind of thing.
Exactly. Something anyone who's lost a relationship can relate to.
And then the film introduces Sumita.
Oh yeah, Sumita. She's in high school, and she has a crush on Takaki, but she doesn't know about him and Akari.
It's like the film is showing Takaki his own unrequited love.
It's really interesting how those stories run side by side, showing how different people deal with similar emotions.
And we can't forget about how time keeps moving forward.
Yeah.
The film uses trains and seasons changing, and you can see the characters aging.
To remind us that time waits for no one.
But even with all that change, the film also looks at the power of memory.
How moments, especially strong emotional ones, stay with us.
Like they become part of who we are.
They shape our present and influence our future.
What about Takaki's dreams? The one where he's a kid with Akari playing in the snow.
Yes. That dream shows how powerful their shared past is. Even though they've grown apart, it still affects him.
It makes you wonder if those memories are good or bad. Do they help us hold on, or do they keep us stuck in the past?
That's something we'll keep talking about as we go deeper into the film.
I'm curious to hear what stood out to you so far.
Yeah.
What did you connect with in terms of love or loss, or how time just keeps moving?
It's interesting how the film doesn't try to make things simple or give us happy endings.
Yeah, it just lets us feel sad and wonder about what could have been.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It lets us explore those feelings and find our own meaning in them.
It reminds us that sometimes the most important relationships are the ones that teach us to let go.
Speaking of letting go, we have to talk about the final meeting between Takaki and Akari. They're adults now, and they bump into each other at a train crossing.
Years later.
Yeah. And it's a scene without any words, but it's full of emotion and symbolism.
And the film uses that train imagery again.
Right. This time, as Takaki and Akari recognize each other, a train goes right between them, separating them.
Like it's showing how much time has passed and how their lives have gone in different directions.
Yeah.
All those missed connections.
But it's such a powerful visual. And then there's Takaki. He smiles, and it's like he's finally at peace.
Like he's letting go of the past. All those what ifs.
He accepts that their lives have gone in different directions, and he's okay with it.
But it's not a completely happy ending, right?
No, there's still that sadness, the bittersweet feeling of what could have been.
The film doesn't pretend things are simple.
It shows how complicated their situation is. There's sadness, but also hope, a sense of closure. It's like by letting go, they both make space for new beginnings.
And that brings us back to Sumida. Remember, her story is happening at the same time as Takaki and Akari's. She's also dealing with unrequited feelings.
Mirroring Takaki's longing for Akari.
It's fascinating how her story, even though it's separate, actually reinforces the film's main themes.
Right, like she also comes to a realization that her feelings for Takaki aren't meant to be.
And she chooses to move on. Just like Takaki does with Akari. It's a powerful message about acceptance and finding your own way.
And this is where the Hindi dub and the transcript add a really interesting layer.
How so?
It makes you think about how language affects how we understand a story, how translation can add new meaning.
That's true. Even though the original Japanese dialogue has its own nuances, the Hindi translation opens the film up to a whole new audience.
People who might not know Japanese culture can still connect with the film's emotions because of the Hindi dubbing love and loss and time. Those are universal. They go beyond culture.
It reminds us that stories are really about human connection. And 5 centimeters per second, even translated, does that beautifully.
Before we finish up, I want to mention the film's style, how it uses visuals and music and pacing to make us feel so much.
Yeah, 5 centimeters per second isn't just a story, it's an experience.
For example, the colors. Notice how bright colors are used for scenes from Takaki and Akari's childhood, showing how strong their connection was.
And as they grow older and drift apart, the colors become more muted.
Like their relationship is fading.
The music is important too.
Yes, the sad melodies, often with piano and strings, really emphasize the longing and the passage of time.
And the pacing is interesting too. Sometimes the film lingers on moments, letting us feel everything.
And sometimes it moves quickly, like time is slipping away.
All of that works together to create something truly immersive, something that stays with you.
So if you haven't seen 5 centimeters per second, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't usually watch anime, this film has something special.
And as you watch, pay attention to the details, the symbolism, the way the film uses time and memory.
And remember, even watching it dubbed in another language, like Hindi, adds something unique to the experience.
It shows how these themes are universal.
As you watch, think about what emotions it brings up for you, how it connects to your own experiences of love loss or time passing.
One thing that really hit me is how the film shows the beauty in fleeting moments. Those cherry blossoms falling at 5 centimeters per second. Even though something is temporary, it can still be so meaningful.
That's an important point. Sometimes we try so hard to hold on to things that we forget to enjoy the present moment.
The film encourages us to appreciate those moments and connections, even if they don't last.
It makes you think about your own relationships, the ones that have come and gone. Did you appreciate them? Did you learn something, even if they ended sadly?
And that's what makes this film so powerful. It doesn't give you easy answers, but it encourages you to think about your own life.
Your own relationships and the precious fleeting nature of time.
And it makes me think about communication. Remember how Takaki loses that letter he wrote for Kari?
It shows how easily we can miss chances to connect.
It highlights how important it is to express our feelings, to take those chances, because we never know what will happen.
To wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. 5 centimeters per second, even though it's animated and in a language you might not understand, explores these universal themes. We all deal with love, loss, and time.
It makes you think about your own life and your relationships and how precious time is. Sometimes the most important connections are the ones that stay with us, even if they don't last forever.
That's right. Sometimes those fleeting connections leave a permanent mark on our hearts.
It's interesting how 5 centimeters per second doesn't shy away from those complex emotions. Instead of giving us easy answers or happy endings, it just lets us sit with the melancholy, the what-ifs, and those feelings that are kind of left unsaid.
And that's what's so powerful about it. It lets us explore those feelings and find our own meaning in them. You know, sometimes the deepest connections, the ones that really stay with us, are the ones that teach us about acceptance, letting go.
And speaking of letting go, we have to talk about that final encounter between Takaki and Akari.
Years later.
Years later, they're both adults now, and they just happen to cross paths at a train crossing. It's this wordless scene, but it's packed with emotion and symbolism.
Yeah, the film uses that train image again. But this time, as Takaki and Akari see each other, a train goes right between them.
Literally separating them.
Think about what that represents. Time, you know, their separate journeys, all those missed connections over the years.
It's such a visual way to show how much has changed. And then there's Takaki's reaction. He smiles, and there's a sense of peace in that smile, like he's finally letting go.
It's like he's letting go of the past, all those what-ifs and could-have-beens. He's accepting that their lives have gone in different directions, and he's finding a way to be okay with it.
But it's not a simple happy ending, is it?
Right, it's not all tied up in a neat bow. The film doesn't try to make things simpler than they are. There's sadness, for sure, but there's also this hint of hope, a feeling of closure. It's like by letting go, both Takaki and Akari can start something new.
And that brings us back to Sumida, whose story we see alongside Takaki and Akari's. Remember, she's dealing with her own feelings for Takaki that aren't returned, just like his longing for Akari.
It's interesting how Sumida's story, even though it seems separate, really highlights those main themes of the film.
Yeah, she also comes to this realization that her feelings for Takaki aren't going to be reciprocated.
Right, and she decides to move on. Just like Takaki does with Akari. It's a strong message about accepting things as they are and finding your own path.
I'm thinking about the Hindi dubbed version and the transcript. It makes you think about how language can change how we see a story, how translation can uncover new layers of meaning.
That's so true. While the original Japanese dialogue has its own subtleties, the Hindi translation makes 5 centimeters per second accessible to a whole new group of people.
Like people who may not have experienced Japanese culture can still connect with the emotions in the film because of the Hindi dubbing.
Exactly. Love and loss and time are universal. They go beyond language and culture. They're things everyone experiences.
It reminds us that at their core, stories are about human connection. And 5 centimeters per second, even translated, does that really well.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on the film's techniques, how it uses visuals and music and pacing to create such strong emotions.
You're talking about how it's not just a story, it's a whole experience.
Exactly. For example, the colors. Do you notice how bright colors are used when we see Takaki and Akari as kids? It shows how intense their connection was.
And then as they get older and drift apart, the colors become less vibrant.
Like their relationship is fading.
And the music, too. The melancholy melodies, often with piano and strings, they really underscore those themes of longing and time passing.
The pacing is deliberate, too. The film takes its time with some moments so we can really feel them.
And other times it moves quickly, like time slipping away.
All of these things work together to create an experience that stays with you.
So if you haven't seen 5 centimeters per second, I definitely recommend checking it out. Even if you don't usually watch anime, there's something special about this film.
As you watch, pay attention to the details, the symbolism, the way the film uses time and memory to tell its story.
And, you know, even watching it in a different language, like in this Hindi version, it really emphasizes how universal these themes are.
Sure.
So as you're watching, think about how it makes you feel. How does it connect to your own experiences with love or loss? Or even just how time seems to fly by?
I think it's really interesting how the film shows the beauty in these fleeting moments, like those cherry blossoms falling at 5 centimeters per second.
Yeah.
It reminds us that something can be temporary, but still so meaningful.
It's like a reminder that sometimes we're so focused on holding on to things that we forget to appreciate what's right in front of us.
The film wants us to cherish those moments and connections, even if they don't last forever.
It makes you think about your own relationships. The ones that have come and gone?
Yeah.
Did you appreciate them while they were happening? Did you learn from them, even if they ended sadly?
And that's what makes this film so interesting. It doesn't give you easy answers, but it makes you think about your own life and your own experiences.
It also makes me think about how we communicate. You know how Takaki loses that letter he wrote for Akari?
Oh, yeah.
It's such a powerful image of how easily we can miss chances to connect.
It shows how important it is to say how we feel, to take those chances.
Because you just never know what might happen.
And sometimes those opportunities disappear before we even realize it.
So to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. Even though 5 centimeters per second is an animated film, and might be in a language you don't understand. It explores these huge themes that we all think about. Love lost, the passing of time.
It's a film that stays with you.
It makes you think about your own life, your own relationships, and how precious and fleeting time really is. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are the ones that leave a mark on us, even if they don't last forever.